Hey ladies, welcome back to another Friday episode, To the Core, episode 11. We are getting there. We are going up in the ranks, ladies. Another episode, To the Core, which I discuss topics from any of my 4 core categories: beliefs, bonds, body biz. It's funny because I tend to be focusing on bonds a lot lately. Beliefs for sure, because beliefs, I'm wholeheartedly, that's my number one, and that's why I put it as number one. Beliefs definitely come up a lot, but bonds, especially our relationships in our family, like with our husbands or our children, this comes up a lot for me, and that's probably why it comes through a lot here, because it's things that I have on my mind or things that I've been going through. So today I wanted to talk about defensiveness. Are you the person in your relationship, or is your spouse or significant other the person that's usually on the defense? Why does anybody ever have to be on the defense in a relationship that's supposed to be this supporting and loving and trusting, right? There should never be any kind of defense. But for whatever reason, we've unconsciously, something in our subconscious, it's followed us from when we were children, something from our family of origin, something from past relationships or friendships. It just sticks with us. And for some reason, you just feel like you have to defend yourself, right? It goes into your fight, flight, or freeze. I think it taps into that mentality when something like this happens, when someone in a relationship, especially when it's someone that's supposed to love you completely, right? And they say something that hurts your feelings, or you're like, oh, why would you say that to me? That's so mean. And then it just builds off that or something, you know? So defensiveness, it plays a role in relationships, whether you want it to or not, but it's being intentional about spotting it and spotting it in yourself, because honestly, we can only do what we can do for ourselves, right? We can help, we can nudge, we can support our significant other or spouse when we see it in them. And I'll talk about that. So I think defensiveness, I said it comes from something in our past. I think it comes from an underdeveloped or an overdeveloped protective instinct, right? If it's an underdeveloped protective instinct, maybe you're a people pleaser. Maybe for me, whenever it came up in situations, I never wanted to, in the back of my mind, I just never wanted to be a doormat. I never wanted to be looked at like a doormat. I always wanted to be independent, strong, and it's silly that in my relationship, in my marriage with Rick, that I even had to feel that way. And I shouldn't have, I'm not saying that it was his fault. It was my fault. It's my fault for having these feelings. He's not telling me to feel like a doormat. He's not saying you should be a people pleaser. It's me. I'm doing it to myself. So I remember early on in our relationship, I do remember situations where we would fight over, I don't even know, whatever. I don't even know. And I would hold my ground. I would just be like, no, I'm not going to give in. I'm not going to do that, because then I'm a pushover. Then I'm a doormat. Then I'm, whatever. And so it would just cause more fights instead of maybe meeting him in the middle, because he's not trying to treat me like a doormat. He's not trying to be bulldozing over me. Right. But that's how I'm taking it. So instead I'd just fight back or feel like I had to stand up for myself. So that's the thing. The underdeveloped protective instinct, you're a pushover, you're a pleaser. But then on the other hand, the overdeveloped protective instinct, you've constantly got this shield up, right? You're constantly just defense. Like anything someone throws at you, anything life throws at you, you are just, that shield is up, right? You're ready to just defend yourself. You're ready to just argue why you're right. You're ready. So how can you get through to someone maybe? So the reason this came up is it's on my mind is, and this isn't specific to anyone. It's not specific to because I've started this group of women and the conversations we're having. It's from my own personal journey in this marriage I've had for 16 years. And it's obviously, again, nothing poor Rick, he becomes the example for so many things. Because of course I can only talk about things I know, right? Bless his little heart. But for me, I always, like I said, I never wanted to be a doormat. So a lot of our fights was me constantly defending myself, right? Even though I didn't need to defend myself. He loves me. My husband loves me. If he didn't love me, he wouldn't be married to me. But just, I always felt like I needed to defend myself and prove my point, even to the extent where it was like too much and like, okay, wow, like you don't need to like come at me like that. You're creating this horrible atmosphere because you're trying to defend yourself against what? Against what? Maybe you are really trying to defend yourself against something, but in most cases, it's your partner, it's your spouse. You love them, they love you. They're not trying to intentionally hurt you, right? So maybe it's when you have a need, let's say, and you don't know how to communicate that need well enough. And so it comes across as a criticism or a complaint to that other person, right? So say I say to Rick, you know what? You don't show public affection enough. You don't hold my hand. You don't hug me. You don't kiss me. You don't just randomly come up and show affection like that, right? This it's not something that really bothers me. So I'm just giving an example. But if I go to him with that and I say, hey, you are horrible at this. You hurt my feelings, or you do this, you're doing it wrong. Is he not going to be on the defense at that? Yeah. Who wouldn't? I would be. If he comes to me, he does it to me. Actually, he used to do it way worse, but now he's gotten a lot better at it. He'd say, you spend money. You're spending money on stupid things, or you're the reason that we're going to be in debt or lose what we have, or, probably not to that extent, but that's how it came across. That's how it came across to me. Whereas now he's learned that instead of coming at me like that and putting me instantly on the defense, like imagine a cat in the back just goes, just instantly I shut down, right? But he could come to me instead and say, hey, you know what? Would you have some time today that maybe we could sit down and discuss our financial goals? Right? Did that not sound so much better than you're spending too much, or why did you spend this much at Target? Or, didn't that sound a lot nicer than blaming me for doing something that I didn't even think was wrong? So we know for sure defensiveness, it shuts down communication, right? It can turn small things into huge fights. So the problem with that I see happening more in myself, and again, I've gotten so much better at this, and 16 years in, I think luckily we've started to figure each other out enough to where I don't let things bother me as much. I've got thicker skin. I've got more self-confidence. I trust that he just loves me, right? I trust that he's not trying to be mean. He just may be a man and says things differently. But the problem with defensiveness is, in the early stages, I believe, is it makes it so if you're constantly telling someone something you need, if you're like, hey, husband, I would really appreciate it if you help me more around the house. Hey, I would really appreciate it if you help me more with the kids. Hey, I had a really rough day at work today. Can you rub my feet? Whatever. You've got needs. You're allowed to have needs. It's fine. You should not ever feel like you can't communicate those needs to your spouse, your partner, right? That's like number one in beliefs, ladies. I will shout it from the rooftops. You are allowed to have your own feelings. You're allowed to have your own needs, and you're allowed to have those needs met, right? We have to fill our own cup before we can be any kind of good mother and any kind of good wife. We have to have a full cup ourselves. So that leads me to what happens if you are coming to your spouse saying these things. These are my needs. This is what I want. And honestly, it usually starts out as nagging. I mean, honestly, if we think about it, ladies, if we're honest with ourselves, it usually comes out as we don't say it until it's a problem, right? We don't say it until we're totally burned out and we're just like, oh my gosh, could you please help me clean the house? Or, oh my gosh, why am I the only one that has to cook dinner? Or, oh my gosh, can you really not smell the baby and change his butt for me while I'm over here doing something else, right? It usually tends to just build up because we try not to be complainers and we try to do everything and take everything on. And that again goes to beliefs. Your cup is empty. So it comes to all of a sudden explosive rage, right? So I think this, if you let it get that far, this person that instead of telling your husband that you have these needs because you know that he'll just go on the defense, like, I do my best, or quit telling me that I do everything wrong, or, like no matter what, everything you say to them, it just has become defense. And so instead, we just don't say anything, right? Because I just shut down instead, right? I don't want to have the fight. I don't want to listen to you argue with me why I'm telling you that you're doing everything wrong, even though that's not what I'm saying. That's not how I'm trying to make it come across, right? But you're probably just at the end of your rope. So what happens is the person who has these needs that are not being met just ends up being quiet, right? Just ends up keeping it to themselves. They'd rather not fight. They'd rather not cause arguments. They'd rather not ruffle feathers, right? So guess what happens instead? Things that start to happen when you end up closing yourself down instead of talking these things through, it'd be probably good in the short, right? You don't have the fights. You can just handle things yourself. But in the long run, it's what I just talked about. It comes through as explosive rage. Like, you're not doing anything for me. Just, you get to the boiling over point, right? You've got that pressure valve. And if you don't release it, it's going to just all of a sudden explode. And you haven't been releasing it. So now you're just explosive rage, right? Or passive aggressive, passive aggressive revenge, right? So you're intentionally not doing things that you know would make your spouse happy, or you're intentionally not picking up his laundry while you're doing everybody else's laundry, right? I'm laughing. It's not funny, but it is how it comes out. Like, you start to feel so undervalued, unseen, right? That person who has these needs, and instead of being able to communicate that you have these needs and getting these needs met, your partner's just shutting down because they're insecure and they're constantly on the defense. Like, you're telling them they're doing something wrong, but you're not. You're just telling them you have needs, right? It has nothing to do with them. It's, I, Gina, have these needs, and if they don't get met, I will explode, or I will passive aggressively do revenge type things, right? Anyway, or you're at the grocery store and you don't get their favorite food, things like that. Women, we think like that. We do. Or here's a big one. Here is a big one. Are you ready for this? Are you listening? Because this is huge. I know this is a big one. This is a big one in so many marriages. Withholding sex, right? It is. I don't care who you are. Don't lie to me. Don't lie to yourself. You withhold sex. And whether you do it intentionally, I'm not saying that. I'm not saying you're intentionally like, well, I'm not going to have sex with him now. I'm not saying that. And that might be what you're doing too, but I'm saying more you're in your mind, you're like, I don't want to have sex with you, right? You are not helping me. I am so overworked and so overtired and so exhausted, or so touched out, right? You've had the baby touching you all day and climbing all over you while you've been trying to get things done, or you've been at a busy office all day that's been so noisy and loud and deadlines, and you're just like, oh my gosh, because your needs aren't getting met, you get to burnout mode, and you're like, I just cannot have one other person touching me, right? So whether you're withholding sex because you're intentionally like, well, I'm not going to have sex with you, or you're just like, I physically cannot be touched. Like, I just need to be alone. I need to be in a bubble, right? So, and not only sex, like any form of affection, any form of like snuggling on the couch. Like, instead of snuggling up on the couch like you normally would. It's, I'm just going to sit over here and I don't want anything to do with you, right? It's all of these things that just start to build up this resentment because of defensiveness. It shouldn't have a place, but it does. So why? Why do we allow ourselves to be defensive? I kind of talked about this, about it being learned maybe in your childhood, maybe in your youth, maybe in high school, maybe whenever it was. It's something that's learned, and it goes into your fight, flight, or freeze instinct, right? Something from negative criticism. Imagine you're a kid and your parent says to you, "You didn't load that dishwasher right. What is the matter with you?" We've all done that. I hate to say that, but I know I've done that, and it sickens me. It sickens me to think that I might be creating a defensive person, you know what I mean? So I have to be more intentional about not talking down to my children like they're not my equals, right? They are my equals. I respect them. I love them. They are my little people. And I need to talk to them so that they hear that they have value, so that they don't turn into these people that think that they don't have value and they're either people pleasers or they're on the defense all the time, right? Or then you see, so the freeze is, like I said, when you just shut down, you become that person that just shuts down because you don't want to deal with the defensive person and the fights and the arguments and the complaints and so you just freeze. You're just like, and I'm done. Shut down, right? So being intentional about recognizing these things in yourself is easier, right? I mean, maybe it's not easy, but it is easier. We can always recognize them in someone else. Oh, I shouldn't say that. Okay, recognizing them in someone else is obviously easy too. You can see it. But what do we do about changing it? That's the hard part. That's the trick, because you can change everything in yourself, right? You can buy every self-help book. You can listen to every podcast on the subject. You can go see a therapist. You can do everything that controls how you respond, react, speak, right? But there's not much you can do about having that other person go on that journey of growth and personal development, right? They have to do that for themselves. So how to talk to someone who always gets on the defense, who's always constantly on the defense. So I've come up with a couple things, and these are just things that I've kind of figured out on my own along the way, and maybe they needed tweaks here and there and whatever, but just a foundation, right? Here's a foundation. So talk about your issues, obviously, in a non-blaming, accusatory, is that a word? A non-blaming way, right? And you absolutely cannot talk about things like this when there's any kind of bad feelings. You cannot be in the middle of an argument. You cannot be upset. It has to be when you're completely calm, everybody's happy, total peaceful mode, right? And then maybe that's a good time to come to your partner and say, "Hey, I just would like to talk about," and when you're saying these things, speak in terms of your wants and your needs rather than what's wrong. Like not saying, "Hey, I'm feeling very unseen by you," right? That's accusatory, right? That's blaming them. They're doing something wrong, but maybe saying something more like, "Hey, I miss hearing about your day," or, "Hey, I miss our little date nights snuggling up on the couch. Hey, I'm trying to think of, off the top of my head, I can't think of a way for, "Hey, I just came up with one. Hey, I miss listening to you put the baby down at night. Like, I love listening to you do that." Or, "Hey, I know your toddler misses you singing him a song at bedtime," or doing tubby time. Maybe the toddler misses you doing the tubby songs or whatever. If there's something specific to your partner, you get what I'm saying, right? Come at them with more of a personalized not blaming way, right? Okay. Put them on, or put it on them. Put it on them as well. So sometime when you're not upset, again, obviously these things cannot happen when you're upset. You ask your partner, how would you prefer I talk to you about things like this? How can I be better at coming to you saying I have needs? How can I, right? And you're not saying it mad. You're just, I'm super curious. What is it that you've not liked in the past? How, so for me, and this will probably actually bleed into the next one, which is understand your body language. So for a lot of our marriage, Rick has accused me of having a tone. Like I joked with my ladies in our group the other day that if resting bitch face was a tone of voice, that would be me. I have that. Like sometimes I come across like I'm angry or I'm upset, and I'm not at all. And Rick would be like, you have a tone. Why do you have this tone? And I'm like, it's just my voice. It is literally just the sound of my voice. I don't know what I'm doing. Or an inflection. Like I'm very animated. And I mean, if you're watching this on the YouTube, you see me, I'm very animated and I get very intense about things I'm talking about. So that can come across as a lot to some people. And especially if there really is in the back of my head something that I'm upset about or some need that I feel like Rick's not meeting for me, it's there. The negativity is there and it's coming out in my body language. Whether I want it to or not, it's coming out in my tone of voice. It's coming out in my body language. So you have to put that in check. You have got to be in the most peaceful mind space, head space you can be in, be just secure in your, I love you, I love my partner. You cannot go at this thinking in the back of your head, oh, I am so mad at you. I am so angry. I'm going to pretend to put on a happy face so that we can talk about this. That's not going to fly. You cannot pretend to put on a happy face when you are mad at someone or when you are irritated, right? You can't. It just comes out. It doesn't matter. It comes out. So your body language is very important. Also, know your message very clearly before you even go into asking someone for something, right? If you don't know, if you kind of are just like, oh, I don't really know. I just feel like I need something, but I don't really know. Why are you putting that on them? That is not for them to try to figure out what you need. You need to be very, very clear and specific about what your need is. I need this. Easy, right? And that goes right into our next one, which is you have to be clear, crystal clear. I mean, dumb it down. No one needs a university lecture on you just needing a hug, right? No one needs to, we don't need to go into all the depths and details and backstory of why you need a hug. It's just simple, clear. I need you to tell me good job. If I've done something, I really need you to verbally say to me, good job, right? It's like a love language. We all know the love languages, right? Or I need you to be more intentional about holding my hand in public. I need you to be more intentional about snuggling on the couch with me, right? It has to be very clear. Make it very simple, clear, easy, right? Use a builder. Let me help you understand what a builder is. So like it's just what I said about the Rick coming at me saying, you spend too much money, or why did you spend this much money? Or, when he has a problem that he knows he wants to talk to me about, it's not going to come across well if he just jumps right into what he's blaming me for or what he's mad about, right? I'm instantly going to be defense, right? If he came at me and said, hey, can we look at our financial goals sometime today? Or, hey, I was just kind of going over some things I maybe want us to plan on doing later in the year. Can we sit down and see what that looks like budget-wise for us, right? That's using a builder. So you're building up to the situation you want to talk about without just like vomiting this blaming and judgment onto your partner, right? So, all right, we made it through. We made it through what I wanted to talk about. I hope that put you in kind of you got some insight from that, right? If you are in a relationship where you are the one that's constantly on the defense, take a look inside, look at yourself. What is going on in you that's making you constantly feel like you have to defend yourself against this person who loves you, who supports you, right? On the other side of that, how can you communicate better with someone who constantly goes on the defense, right? So you obviously can't be the one that's making them change that. You can't be the one that's in their brain doing it, but there are ways that you can maybe communicate better, be the one that's communicating better. So I have one of the ladies in my group, and I love this. This is maybe a teeny bit off topic, but I love this. So she has kind of anxiety, and a coach that she's worked with in the past, or a therapist, I don't remember, anyway, said, hey, people with anxiety, it tends to be they just have a lot of things going on in their brains, right? Like so much stuff going on in their brains. And I actually can relate to this a lot because Rick doesn't have anxiety, but his brain just moves at a speed. Like he just rattles things off at me. Like, you need to do this. You need to do this. Today we need to do this. This needs to get done. Da, 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 da. Like, oh my gosh. And my brain does not function like that. And so instead of it coming across like, hey, these are just things that happen to be on my mind and I need to get them out, otherwise I'll forget, it comes across like I'm his secretary. And if I don't get them done, he's going to be mad and fire me, right? Or I'm an employee. He talks, I'm constantly like, I am not your employee. Stop talking to me like that. But that's not what he means. So I've learned that this is just how he has to process things. So this girl in my group, she actually, this woman in my group, she actually told us about this thing that she's been doing. So to get things out of her head, she does brain dumps, right? So she just writes things down for herself to get things out of her head so that it's not just chaos in her mind. So this is usually people that can't sleep at night because they have all this chaos in their brain that they can't quiet. So this is a good technique for you if that's you. Write everything down, everything you're thinking about, just random, whatever it is. Like, don't forget the kids' shoes that are drying outside. I don't know. That's so random, but just whatever it is, just throw it down on a piece of paper. She started, this is amazing. It blew my mind. I'm like, this is so simple and so amazing. I love it. She started writing down all the things that were like on her to-do list. Just anything that a woman thinks about, like pick up the toys in the living room, dishes, unload the dishwasher, move the laundry to the dryer, anything, right? Anything in the day that we're thinking about, oh, pick up milk or anything, right? She started writing it down and leaving that notebook in the center of the kitchen table. So somewhere where he can see it as well. And she said he just started marking things off it. He just started doing things from the list for me. She didn't ask him to. She didn't say a word. She didn't say that that's what this was. She didn't say, this is our chore chart for the day, husband. We need to do this. She just did it. She just wrote down all the things that she needed to get done and set it on the center of the kitchen table. And she said he just started marking things off and doing them. Like, it was such an aha moment for me because our husbands are not intentionally trying to be lazy or mean or not help around the house, or they just don't know. Sometimes they can't read our mind. And like Rick, I know when I come home to a clutter, like the house, the toys are everywhere. It stresses me out. It just makes me feel like I'm suffocating, right? Clutter makes me feel like I'm suffocating. And he before he'd be like, that's so dumb. Why do you feel that way? That's what a weird thing to think about. Like, who cares? We'll pick it up later, or the baby's just going to play with that stuff again tomorrow, or we're just going to sleep in our bed again tonight. Why would I make it? Those kinds of things, they just, for whatever reason, it's followed me from my youth, my family of origin, whatever. It's followed me. And so now clutter is just chaos for me, and it makes me feel like I'm suffocating. So now he understands that. He understands that instead of leaving dishes in the sink so that when I get home, instead of wanting to sit on the couch and snuggle with him and be like, hey babe, I start rage cleaning instead, right? Instead, I look at the sink and it is instantly something that I have to get done, or it's just going to make me crazy. But those are the kind of things he's learning. So anyway, I hope that helps. Try it. I would love to hear back, you guys. If you try this and you see some results from this, I want to hear about it. So reach out to me on Instagram or tag me in a post or something. But if this message, if this episode just made you say, oh my gosh, aha, or you know somebody that needs to hear this today, please forward it along. And come check us out, revitalizedwomanhood.com and Revitalized Womanhood on YouTube and Instagram. Again, I will tell you, I really, really, really personally think that everybody should do the 4 weeks to a fresh start. It's the free program that I have on revitalizedwomanhood.com. And it's basically a month-long email series that helps you kind of get your mindset into goals and what your vision is for yourself. It's not like, I mean, it can be. I'm not limiting it to, I'm going to rule the world, right? It's just maybe making your brain think in a different way than it has been thinking lately, right? It's just putting you in a different headspace. So I really encourage you to go and check that out. Like I said, it's free. It's a free month-long email series. And again, I would love to hear any of your thoughts on that. Please tag me in any of your progress with that or reach out to me. I would love to hear about that. Thanks again for being here with me on my Friday episode of To the Core, and we'll see you next week, you guys.